On November 6, 2014, cops in Mexico City found a dead body. A piece of the body was found in an empty lot near the city exit. After a few days, people in different parts of the nation's city found bags with limbs connected to them. The scary part was that the arms had no fingers or toes on them. The police sent a warning because it looked like a violent criminal was working in the area. Police units searched the neighborhoods. The unlucky man's head and limbs needed to be found to stop any more atrocities from happening. Everyone then knew that a ruthless murderer was behind this crime. Forensic specialists were unable to locate the skull or fingers, but they were able to confirm that the bones belonged to the same individual. However, identifying this individual was rendered impossible given the lack of digits. Mexico City native Alejandra Lafuente is the heroine. She's a fiery brunette with stunning hair and vibrant brown eyes that draw attention to her thick black lashes, which seem like tar. She did her best to keep her athletic, slim body via regular exercise, yoga, and deep breathing techniques. Alejandra cherished her personal hygiene routine. She was a regular at spas, massage parlors, and beauty salons. On sunny days, she could complete her science work while lounging on the beach. On overcast days, she could go to tanning facilities. Overall, it's safe to conclude that the girl had an idealized view of her own beauty and adored herself immensely. As far as her career was concerned, Alejandra was not behind. Alberto Dente, her renowned psychiatrist father, is a doctor of sciences. He is a shining star in the scientific community for his work on mental diseases, including schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. His patient experiments have garnered him as much notoriety as his scientific achievements. Alejandra held her father in the highest esteem. She decided to follow in his footsteps because she wanted to be just like him. She achieved her goal by enrolling at and graduating with honors from the top institution for psychiatry. She was able to prepare and defend a thesis on manic depressive disorder thanks to her tenacity, ingenuity, and exceptional intelligence, as well as the contacts she had with her father. But Alejandra never went on to practice psychiatry. A psychotherapist's job appealed to her. The young woman was able to get her license and set up shop in a brand new business center, right in the middle of the capital city because of the money her father gave her. She saw exclusively female customers, though there was no dearth of them. Women sought help for issues such as depression, poor self-esteem, marital troubles, and eating disorders. Although Alejandra was instrumental in resolving family issues, her private life was disappointing, as is so frequently the case. After the young woman's first marriage ended in divorce, she produced two lovely daughters, a daughter with Alejandra's eyes and a daughter with her father's humor, from her second marriage. Nevertheless, Alejandra remained unfazed. She didn't think she needed to give up on herself just because she had two children. The idea of finding a guy who could complete her and provide a loving home for her girls remained a pipe dream. The unnamed ex-husband returned home to Alejandra at some point following the couple's separation. His routine consisted of the guy spending time on weekends with his two young daughters and, if necessary, pitching in to help his ex-wife around the house. That particular visit, though, would prove to be the ex-husband's last. Assuming the front door lock was stuck, Alejandra requested that he access the house via the backyard. The guy entered the house. Alejandra invited him into the bathroom, explaining that her youngest daughter was now taking a bath. The man stepped inside without any suspicions. The home was devoid of sound, devoid of the customary cartoons and the sound of children's laughter. When the father entered the restroom, he saw tape all over the floor and noticed that his daughter was missing from the bathtub. Something was clearly wrong, and he was starting to notice it. At that very moment, his ex-wife sprung from behind him, brandished a hammer and smacked him on the head with all her might. As the man hit the ground, blood spurted from the huge hole in his head. He looked around and saw nothing but blood. The individual was hopelessly harmed, as the specialist discovered in due course. The initial impact of a hefty, blunt item was fatal almost immediately. The oldest daughter, who arrived home from a friend's house at an unanticipated hour, became a silent observer of this very disturbing photograph. The kids would sit and watch as their parents fought. Taking her frustrations out on her pals was just one more way Alejandra proved she was mentally ill. Friends took note of the young woman's ability to physically assault her spouse. Scratches on his neck and arms were a common sight. Her inadequacy and outbursts were watched by the roommates all the time. However, things spiraled out of hand this time. The daughter bolted from the house and immediately started yelling for rescue. A concerned neighbor sprung into action almost instantly, and they in turn contacted the police. The psychologist was taken into custody and faces murder charges. The juvenile was confined to a cell at the station and was ordered to remain there for a month prior to her initial trial hearing. Alejandra claimed innocence, and her attorneys advanced a defense based on her right to self-defense. They claimed that Alejandra's ex-husband was so envious of her that he made up the story that she was inviting males into the house, which may have a harmful effect on young girls' mental health. Unannounced and intending to find his ex-wife with another guy, he arrived at her house through the back door on the day of the crime. After that, he dove in on Alejandra, who was in the restroom assembling a nightstand. As a measure of self-defense, she proceeded to strike her ex-husband twice on the back of the head. The sentencing took place on June 14, 2012. The presence of two small children and the defense's evidence led to Alejandra's sentencing of 1 year and 4 months. The period behind bars was substituted with a suspended sentence due to the collaborative efforts of attorneys and the financial support of her father. An additional appeal seeking dismissal of the charges was lodged a few months down the road. Assault in self-defense was the legal theory advanced. The human rights advocates' unfathomable sympathy for the lady accused of being a victim of domestic abuse led them to want a jury trial. Consequently, the court deliberated and ultimately found the defendant not guilty. Following her release, the young woman continued to offer her psychotherapy in the same manner. As with other women in North America, she portrayed herself as a victim of sexism, who, after a long fight, succeeded in achieving equality. The fabricated reputation only served to increase Alejandra's appeal to prospective customers. The son of Mexican business magnate Allen Carrera. Francis, Allen Carrera, was soon introduced to Maria Alejandra. A guy of statuesque stature, he was tall and attractive. He inherited a successful family business from his father, who had been the Central District's chief of special services. Not long after, Allen grew his company into a nationwide network of construction supply outlets. Allen had a somewhat legitimized business and a closely associated criminal enterprise, the latter of which was shrouded in secrecy. Allen was involved with a criminal organization that was involved in smuggling psychoactive drugs into the U.S. A town on the border served as their base, and they stationed bought police officers to protect it. In the South, this gang was in charge of a small fraction of the drug trade for psychoactive drugs. The fact that the police were able to coerce Allen's father into giving a confession led to the conviction of his son and the impending 20-year jail term for him. The Witness Protection Program, however, managed to secure Allen Carrera's early release on July 18, 2000. His son and his lawful business took up all of his attention immediately upon his release. The boy matured rapidly, taking like his father an outlook and upbringing. Following in his father's entrepreneurial footsteps, Allen Carrera became an entrepreneur after finishing college. Despite his youth, he took full responsibility for running the home appliance business, which piqued his attention. Even though it was smaller than his father's firm, this one was rather lucrative. Despite the abundance of women in his life, Allen's true love was a brilliant, lovely, and well-behaved classmate whom he married off when he was a young man. The marriage had a brief but happy duration. A lovely girl was born to them, but Allen's heavy workload and near total absence from home ultimately led to the dissolution of their marriage. The lady Allen had loved since high school was very difficult for him to let go of. Since reading new novels did not improve his mood, he turned to alcohol as a means of coping with his feelings of isolation and despair. This developed into a harmful habit over time. Books, AA groups, drips, all were means by which Allen sought solace from his long-term sadness and alcoholism. Nevertheless, fate ultimately did not direct him to a meeting with the renowned psychiatrist Alberto, who happened to be Maria Alejandra's father. Even Allen's ex-wife was having a tough time getting a divorce. The psychiatrist who helped Allen get well advised the lady to see Alejandra since, for ethical reasons, he could not be the leader of both of their marriages. But he kept Alejandra's fact that she was his daughter a secret from the clients. As soon as Alejandra met her patient's ex-husband, she knew they would be perfect for one other. His reputation preceded him as an amiable, prosperous, and prime-of-life individual. Alejandra quickly requested that her client bring her ex-husband back for another appointment without giving it any thought. In only one session, the therapist claims she can dissolve the tight tie between the ex-spouses and cure their problems. Alejandra set out to woo the business magnate from the very beginning of their passionate session. The outcome was swift. Allen offered the therapist coffee right after the appointment so they could talk about family issues. The young woman first declined to go on a date out of propriety, citing medical ethics as the reason why it was unethical. The date, however, was that very night. An affair spun between them very fast. Not long after, Allen's ex-wife learned of it. Shock washed across her. Although she considered notifying the doctor's ethics committee about the occurrence, she ultimately decided against it. Because Alejandra was an expert in her field, she was successful in persuading her customers to move on. The doctor concludes that a happy future is impossible since it indicates envy and a reluctance to let go of the ex-spouse. Not only did Allen's ex-wife opt out of applying to the commission, but the sessions had also concluded. The connection with the newlyweds, meantime, progressed quickly. Living together was the decision of the young individuals a few months following their first date. They waited 2 more months before deciding to get their relationship legally recognized. However, Allen had no idea that his fiancée had hidden demons from him or the reasons for her ex-husband's divorce. Allen traveled out to spend the weekend with his folks in April 2014. It provided a perfect opportunity to brag about his fiancée and their upcoming nuptials. The revelation of such crucial information so late came as a complete shock to Allen's parents. Strangely, they were unaware of Alejandra's involvement in their son's life. It took 1 week after the parents met to officially register the marriage. Curiously, Alejandra requested that her husband refrain from contacting her loved ones. They skipped sending out invitations since they were going for a small, intimate wedding and couldn't afford to invite everyone they wanted. Nonetheless, the bride's father was present during the wedding, as was later revealed. It appeared like something out of a fairy tale when the young family's lives began. She was young, full of life, and full of dreams, but it was short-lived. Alejandra couldn't contain her hysteria. There was a noticeable shift in the dynamic between the newlyweds. Even with his closest pals, Allen kept his private life under wraps. Consequently, very little was known of the couple's private lives. But the pair no longer appeared happy, and it was clear that their previous connection had cracked. The moment Allen met Alejandra, he cut ties with his family. The uninvited parents to the wedding were the final straw. Even their phone calls were infrequent after that. Those who remained friends with Allen saw that his wife was increasingly agitated, acting inappropriately at times, and losing her temper more easily. After a handful of these occurrences, Allen felt terrible remorse and vowed to cut down on our combined gatherings. According to Alejandra's account, she decided to hack into her husband's cell phone one night. As is customary, explicit correspondence with some women was found. As far as Alejandra was concerned, this was the final straw. She testified in court that her spouse had subjected her to physical violence, verbal abuse, and humiliation. It was futile to try to save this marriage once infidelity was also found out. For whatever reason, Alejandra refrained from attempting to salvage the relationship by utilizing conventional therapeutic techniques. The young woman dealt with Allen using a strategy she was previously familiar with after considering her husband's infidelity. Once she had up her mind, she could devote herself entirely to hatching the ideal murder plot. Allen, however, carried on with his life as usual, taking things slowly. What was ahead of him was completely unknown to him. Allen and his family had nothing in common. He nevertheless made sure to attend the yearly celebration of his grandfather's birthday. Even though Allen's parents made it plain that his wife was not their most esteemed visitor, she made it to the feast. Unbeknownst to Alejandra and her partner, this was the last time Allen's family would see him alive. The last time Allen's phone was used was to inform his family via text message that he had returned home safely from his birthday celebration on October 31, 2014. His lack of communication and absence from work for many days was peculiar, given that he had never been absent before. The businessman took great pride in his job, and a new store was about to open its doors. Following Allen's return from vacation, Alejandra carries out her dreadful plot, which leads to Allen's abrupt disappearance. She changed his nightly milk routine by adding a strong sleeping medication. She proceeded to suffocate her husband with a pillow, taking pleasure in seeing his pitiful efforts to remove it and catch his air as he gradually lost consciousness. The next most difficult step was disposing of the corpse. Because Allen was too big, she had to compromise on her time commitments. To retrieve an electric saw, Alejandra hurried to the vegetable patch of her neighbor. She grimaced as she cut her husband's corpse to pieces. Doing such a thing would be the act of a genuine sadist. She then had the good sense to remove teeth and chop off fingers before placing the remains in trash bags. In the event that the corpse was discovered, these would aid the inquiry in positively identifying the individual. The bags were put into luggage by Alejandra, so she could discreetly remove the body from the residence. However, she was unsuccessful. Even though it was getting close to daylight, Alejandra still couldn't sneak out of the home with the bag. From her window, an insomniac elderly neighbor saw her. When the young woman left so early, it worried her a bit. In addition, Alejandra was acting quite oddly, and her husband for some reason refused to lend a hand with the larger bags. At first light, she would survey her surroundings. The watchful neighbor was even more taken aback when Alejandra came home. She had, as it turned out later, disguised her tracks by dispersing bags containing her ex-husband's remains in several areas. She continued with her usual routine when the new day broke. A human body devoid of teeth and fingers was the first gruesome find unearthed by Mexican authorities on November 6, 2014. Because of the extreme violence of the incident, the whole police force was on high alert. Additional remains were discovered in other sections of the city within 24 hours. It would be determined that Alejandra's extended departure from home was the reason for the considerable distance between the locations where the parcels were discovered. The finest forensic lab in the world was notified, and all the body pieces were promptly identified as belonging to the same individual. To keep herself out of trouble, the culprit began sending messages to Allen's family. In her efforts to avoid suspicion, she unintentionally exacerbated the situation. On behalf of Allen, Alejandra notified his parents that they would be away on vacation and would not be in touch. The father of Alejandra thwarted the entire scheme. Alberto started calling Allen's dad's house to find out whether his son-in-law's relatives knew where Alejandra was. The patients were understandably anxious that they would miss counseling sessions because Alberto hadn't heard from her for some time. After some time has passed, he contacts Allen's family once again to share the news that his daughter has been located and is in clinical depression as a result of her husband's infidelity. The news terrified the family, and they wasted no time in trying to locate Allen. After that, The businessman's loved ones contacted the authorities. It was determined by the lab specialists to match Allen's traits with the freshly discovered corpse's remnants. His family also confirmed his identity, and the resemblance was uncanny. For Allen's residence and place of business, the inquiry procured a search warrant. There was a mound of new dirt discovered in the backyard. Digging led to the discovery of the man's teeth and fingers. The apprehension of Alejandra was swift. In addition to the car's trunk and the garage, a room had blood-stain traces. Alejandra first attempted to downplay her responsibility. Just like with her ex-husband, she thought she could get away with it this time. Still, the inquiry resolved the matter swiftly. An elderly witness's evidence was helpful since the time she indicated was consistent with Allen's predicted time of death. Because of her position, Alejandra was able to acquire a potent sleeping tablet, the type of substance that was previously reserved for doctors. The situation was made worse by this. Thanks to the evidence that was found, it was possible to connect Alejandra to the horrible murder of her husband. The man entered the residence and did not re-emerge according to surveillance footage. Surveillance footage further verified the removal of the bags. The jury returned their decision on December 10, 2014. As a result of her conviction for murder with violence, trying to cover it up and using her official position, Alejandra received a life sentence. Even her father, who attempted to free his daughter from jail by bribing officials and using his contacts, was unable. But all he succeeded in doing was preventing any further attention by keeping the trial closed to the public and press. But his career was the driving force behind all of his actions. Nobody is going to seek help from a professional after seeing how he brought up a vicious monster and failed to identify issues with his daughter in a timely manner. During the trial, the circumstances surrounding Alejandra's first husband's death were also brought up. The problem is that the evidence in this instance has been lost to the ages. Also taken into account was the account of Alejandra's father's role in the events. Everyone thought he and his daughter were up to no good, and they committed crimes for the sake of science. On the other hand, there was no proof of this theory. The victim's repeated pleas led to the death penalty being mitigated. Sentencing of this kind is quite unusual in Mexico, and it is particularly unusual at the present moment. Alejandra, it seems, was a cold-hearted realist. Despite claims to the contrary from medical professionals, she suffered from serious mental health concerns. With the help of her father's power and her official position, she was able to carry out her irrational ideas without anybody noticing. Since her initial transgression had only set her free, Alejandra believed she could commit whatever evil she wanted. If this vile lady hadn't been acquitted the first time, Allen may still be here today. But discussing it at this point would have been futile. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more shocking stories like this one. I'll see you in my next video.